everybody. Welcome back to Rote Reactions. This is take 2 for us because we got a half hour into this movie, and then I realized I hadn't started the recording. So all of these are going to be our first reactions.
Yes, totally genial.
At least for the first half hour. Then we're going to get to okay, so kind of know the rundown. What we're doing here today is we are going to be looking at Stonewall Uprising, which was done by PBS, the Public Broadcasting Network, that was out and is still available here in the States. But what it is a publicly supported, people contribute to their local PBS stations for them to be able to develop programs like this. And this is part of a series called The American Experience. And they do all kinds of social topics. They did one on natives. They've done one on historical moments. And this is one of their historical moments, but it focuses on Stonewall Uprising. And what many people don't realize is that at the time, there were fissures already happening. The cracks were already happening by the time you get to Stonewall, which became the internationally recognized explosion of the volcano that was our queer oppression. And there were other societies that were around. There was the Mattachine Society. There was the Daughters of Bilitis. There were these societies that queer people had created to keep in contact with one another. My husband actually was in a relationship with a male at the time, and he described going into a gay bar for the first time, and he said it scared the bejesus out of him because all the windows were dark. It was just, it was such a surreal experience. They didn't even stay long because it was just creepy how dark it had to be in order for you to be there. So I have firsthand knowledge of my husband relating to me what it was like at that time. So it was a very, very different period, and society made sure that queer people did not have any sort of political power. And what Stonewall did is when it erupted, finally, it actually gave us that power. We finally saw we've had the power all along. We just needed to organize and do it. So this is from the American Experience. We are now recording, so now we will get the reaction. Okay, so here we are. Are you ready to go again for the first half hour? And then we'll
totally psyched.
Okay,
yes.
Right. So you took your notes. Now you can relay your notes while we're watching. Lord have mercy. Okay, here we go.
And this is really good education, honestly, because some of us, me included, have never really delved into the history of it.
Right.
So really knowing what it's like, it's important. Especially since it wasn't that long ago. I mean,
right. And and part of the thing is a lot of the queer youth nowadays, they know of it, but they don't know what the importance really is. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this documentary during our Pride movies that we're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think it gives you a complete perspective from the people who were in the riots, the law enforcement officers, and the reporters that were all talking about it.
Yeah.
The watering hole on the savannah, it was just everybody was there. We were all there.
Because there was nowhere else to go.
Right.
The gay bars were the social centers of gay life. Gay bars were to gay people what churches were to blacks in the South.
And I do know that Navy towns often became centers for queer men who, after they served, they would just stay in that city and develop there. And so San Francisco, that's how it developed its queer community. So sometimes out of the military is where a lot of queer centers started to spring up.
Wow.
Some identification.
That is very surprising and very interesting, actually.
Yeah, because military brought people to city centers.
Yeah.
We're not going. That's it. We're not going.
That's what happened Stonewall night to a lot of people. We went, oh my God. I'm not alone. There are other people that feel exactly the same way.
That is so important, because all of these things they were doing, they were just to isolate us, from one another.
Yep.
Like be scared, be hidden,
Coming like there was a real war.
This was the Rosa Parks moment, the time that gay people stood up and said no. And once that happened, the whole house of cards that was the system of oppression of gay people started to crumble.
That night, the police ran from us, the lowliest of the low. And it was fantastic.
I can't even imagine the courage it must have taken to stand up to, you know, this establishment that is constantly
but I think it was because a lot of them felt they had nothing left to lose. And when you have someone that's in that position, they're really dangerous because they've got nothing left.
Into the world of homosexuals.
That's true.
Your daughter, lured into lesbianism.
Lured, yeah, of course. Instead, they should live this perfect, standard American happy life.
Fake life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want them to lose all chance of a normal, happy, married life?
Secondhand smoke life.
Exactly. I can't believe they are doing that with the kid there. Oh my God, that is horrible.
And they would also drink heavily, you know, oh, what do you have? You know,
God.
The whole personification of it being perfect. But there were all these, you know, cigarettes and booze and, you know, those are coping mechanisms. You know?
Said that homosexuality was a mental defect, maybe even a form of psychopathy.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The average homosexual, if there be such, is promiscuous. He is not interested in nor capable of a lasting relationship like that of a heterosexual marriage.
Oh, I have to tell my husband that of 30 years.
Thank you.
We're not capable. Honey, we're not capable.
I think the whole idea of saying the happy homosexual is to create a mythology about the nature of...
Ugh, what a horrible man.
And what's interesting, my husband was studying to become a psychiatrist at this time.
Oh.
Dealing with troubled youth.
Oh my God,
it was at this period of so he was in the thick of all of this stuff in many respects.
Wow.
Homosexuality is in fact a mental illness.
So he knew of this guy.
Which has reached epidemiological proportions.
He even looks creepy. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
In those days, what they would do, these psychiatrists, is they would try to talk you into being heterosexual. If that didn't work, they would do things like aversive conditioning, show pornography, and then give you an electric shock.
Oh my God.
This involves showing the gay man.
Just looking at it just gives me the creeps. Like, how can people be so cruel to one another? Like,
strong electric current.
Obviously, very easily.
In a short period of time, he was unable to get sexually aroused to the pictures. And hopefully, he will be unable to get sexually aroused outside in other settings as well.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
Gay people who were sentenced to medical institutions because they were found to be sexual psychopaths were subjected sometimes to sterilization, occasionally to castration, sometimes to medical procedures such as lobotomies, which were felt by some doctors to cure homosexuality and other sexual diseases.
How can you as a doctor think it's okay to torture someone? Like, honestly.
Because the sickness was considered worse.
Where they go up and the frontal part of the brain. The last time I saw him, he was a walking vegetable. Because he was homosexual.
I really wonder, like, their families, were they convinced they were helping? Like, when they see their children after everything that they did, I can't even.
Well, at most points, they were already shunned. They didn't exist anymore.
Satisfy
my God.
Parents.
And it's true, right? Sometimes you just ended up homeless from one day to the next, right? They just kick you out.
Yeah.
Like.
Yep.
Or they sent you to one of these horrible places.
Not being comfortable with yourself.
When I was growing up in the 50s, I was supposed to get married to some guy, produce, the usual 2.3 children. And I could look at a guy and say, well, objectively, he's good looking, but I didn't feel anything. Just didn't make any sense to me.
She's describing exactly how I felt, but with girls. Exactly. I was like, but what's the point? I mean, I know she's pretty, but like...
And I knew that I was lesbian. And
nothing happening here.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. Move on.
I would go through fire for that experience.
Yeah.
For those kisses.
Oh.
And that's healthy. I'm going to raise this saw and chop you off.
Yeah.
Delicately pats his hair and adjusts his collar. His movements.
Well, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't... Oh, so he's not a real boy. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Ugh. Like, honestly, leave children alone.
Labeled gay, just different. Somehow being gay was the most terrible thing you could possibly be. And I just didn't understand that. I just thought you had to get through this, and I thought I could get through it, but you really had to be smart about it, clever, remember everything. Because I really realized I was being trained as a straight person, so I could fool these people.
Right.
Yep.
As
Been there.
King Kong, I would wait till there was nobody left to be the girl, and then I would be the girl.
He's a faggot, he's a sissy, queer. Queer was very big. Homo was big.
When did we reclaim queer and it stopped being a horrible slur?
The 90s into the 2000s, we started to reclaim. Well, you remember in Pride, when we saw the movie, he said, we take what they throw at us and we own it. And by owning it, you take away their power.
Yeah. It's nice.
So I attempted suicide by cutting my wrist.
It hurts when I hear people like trying to end their lives because they're gay. Like, I can't even imagine, the pain they must have been feeling,
I don't want to be this way.
Yeah.
This is not
it's just...
This isn't everything that I have. Kicked out of the church, be damned to hell. Because to be gay represented to me either very super effeminate men or...
Which is what Hollywood promoted.
Yeah, exactly.
As we saw in the movies.
Theaters of 42nd Street or in the subway tea rooms would be masturbating.
That's the thing, right? Like the media has this power to shape our perception of ourselves sometimes.
And by changing stories that were about us to something else, we were taken out of the picture. So then when they did decide to do it, they could say whatever they wanted. You know?
Jimmy hadn't enjoyed himself so much in a long time.
I want to question why Jimmy hadn't enjoyed himself so much. Was his father a non-existent father, or?
He knew he shouldn't be interested, but
of course, stereotypical creep.
what Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick. A sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious. A sickness of the mind.
And the thing is, they act like this was all something that had just happened. They talk about luring the lesbians, like it was something. There was no acknowledgement that this should have been going on since humans walked the earth.
Yeah. And it's because of this enforced invisibility. Sometimes, it's like, oh no, they're surfacing. Let's hide them or make them go away,
I had cousins 10 years older than me, and they had a car sometimes. And I would get in the back of the car, and then they would say, we're going to go see faggots.
That is so awful, like so awful. It's like, come, let's drive by.
We're like carnival, oddities.
Yeah. That was one of the things you did in New York. It was like a Barnum and Bailey aspect of it. It was fun to see fags.
Oh, God. And the entire thing keeps ignoring women.
And yet,
men.
here all these straight people that have to film us and what we do, and it's just like their obsession with us is really suspect. As the kids say, it's a bit sus.
Yeah, like that guy, like creeping out on everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, that's normal behavior.
Like, I'm going to film them in the restroom. Come on, man.
I want to know how many of those photographers watch those home movies.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but really, sometimes the most stout, enforcers of these horrible things are themselves gay and totally in denial.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
and in the closet.
why?
But it's serious.
Why?
Don't kid yourselves about it. They can be anywhere. They can be judges, lawyers.
This is what's going on in Florida now. And this is a movie from Florida,
So if
50 years ago.
have let yourself become involved with an adult homosexual,
It's no different. This is what's happening in Florida right now.
doing this on a regular basis,
I have a friend who's a gay teacher who's a haven in his school for high schoolers. And now he's threatened.
with a homosexual, your parents are
God,
going to know
but
about it. And you will be caught.
that's horrible. Like, why?
Because this is
is
one
public opinion
Because
swinging
this is what they're obsessed with. They don't have policies that are popular with the people, so they start culture wars in order to make villains. It's a page out of Hitler's propaganda book. The same thing.
It's
No
like,
different.
let's find a minority, a scapegoat, let's hate them.
Of issues of redemption, is it possible?
And drag, quote unquote. The downside was that you could get arrested. You could definitely get arrested if someone had, someone clocked you or someone spooked that you were not really, what you appeared to be on the outside.
3 articles of clothing had to be of your gender, or you would be in violation of that law.
Mind you, socks didn't count. So it was underwear and undershirt. Now, the next thing was going to ruin the outfit.
If someone was dressed as a woman, you had to have a female police officer go in with her. They'd go into the bathroom or any place that was private that they could either feel them or check them visually.
We were second-class citizens. We had no
Yeah.
rights.
Oh my God, that's just hearing about these things. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to endure that kind of mistreatment and like?
One time on the way to jail, we were all locked up together on a chain in the paddy wagon, and the paddy wagon stopped for a red light or something, and one of the queens said, "Oh, this is my stop." We did use humor to cover pain, frustration, anger.
Very often, they would put the cops in dresses with makeup, and they usually weren't very convincing.
It looked like a man with women's clothes on.
Cops in drag.
The police would zero in on us because sometimes they would be in plain clothes, and sometimes they would even entrap.
Yes, entrapment did exist, particularly in the subway system, in the bathrooms.
But was it considered illegal even back then, and they were just ignoring it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rules of.
Of course they were.
Again, we had no political power, so.
Yeah.
But we did, but we didn't know it. The whole system relied, which is why it's described as House of Cards, it relied on that myth that we had no power.
You name it.
Yeah.
Naturally, you get careless, you fall for it, and the next thing you know, you have silver bracelets on both arms.
Oh.
You read about Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams and Gore Vidal and all these actors and stuff, Liberace and all these people running around doing all these things. And then you came to New York and you found out, well, maybe they're doing them, but us little middle-class homosexuals, we're getting busted all the time. Every time we go, every time we have a place to go, it gets raided.
That's what you were saying, right? The darkness, the anonymity.
The lights came on. It's like, stop dancing.
It must have been terrifying.
To stop whatever you're doing and separate. Because that's what they were looking for, any excuse to try to bust the place.
So the club would flashlight, turn it on, and all the gays knew to separate from each other.
Yeah.
Act like they were just there by themselves.
ID cards, you knew they were phonies. And
So you had to come prepared. Fake ID, everything.
Yep. Yeah, so you didn't get published.
Wow.
At the peak, as many as 500 people per year were arrested for the crime against nature, and between 3,000 and 5,000 people per year arrested for various solicitation or loitering crimes.
Wow.
This is every year in New York City. Well, it was a nightmare for the lesbian or gay man who was arrested and caught up in this juggernaut. But it was also a nightmare for the lesbians and gay men who lived in the closet. This produced an enormous amount of anger within the lesbian and gay community in New York City and in other parts of America. Gay people were not powerful enough politically to prevent the clampdown, and so you had a series of escalating skirmishes in 1969. Eventually, something was bound to blow.
And that's it, right? You can only push so far before people just get fed up.
I was very young. One of the terms for gay people was twilight people. Meaning that we never came out until twilight, till it got dark. Gay bars were always on side streets, out of the way, in neighborhoods that nobody would go into.
There was at least one gay bar that was run just as a hustler bar for straight gay married men.
I don't get that.
They're straight presenting because they're married, but they like to have sex with men.
Licensed premise made the place disorderly. So nobody would set up a place where we could meet because they were afraid that the cops would come in and close it. And that's how the mafia got into the gay bar business.
Whoa, the mafia?
They realized there was money to be made there.
Oh, we'll volunteer. You know, we'll set up some gay bars and serve overpriced watered-down drinks to you guys. And the Stonewall was part of that system.
I thought it was one word.
They owned the jukeboxes. They owned the cigarette machines. And most of the liquor was off a truck hijacking.
Whoa, okay.
It was 100% profit. I mean, they were stealing the liquor, then watering it down, and then charging twice as much as they charged it one door away at the 55.
The Stonewall, they didn't have a liquor license. And they were raided by the cops regularly, and they were payoffs to the cops. It was awful.
I had been in some gay bars, either for a story or gay friends would say, oh, we're going to go in for a drink there. Come on in. Are you too uptight to go in? But I had only stuck my head in once at the Stonewall. It was a down-at-the-heels kind of place. It was a lot of street kids and things like that. It was not a place that, in my life, me and my friends paid much attention to. We knew it was a gay bar. We walked past it. It meant nothing to us.
It was a bottle club, which meant that I guess you went to the door and you bought a membership or something for $1, and then you went in and then you could buy drinks.
We knew that they were serving drinks out of vats and buckets of water, and believed that there had been some disease that had been passed.
I never bought a drink at the Stonewall. Never, never, never.
The bar itself was a toilet, but it was a refuge. It was a temporary refuge from the street.
The Stonewall pulled in everyone from every part of gay life. Everyone from the street kids who were white and black kids from the South, all kinds of designers, boxers, big museum people, medievalists. First, you gotta get past the door. There's a little door that slides open with this power-hungry nut behind it that you see this much of his eyes, he sees that much of your face, and then he decides where you're gonna get in.
Well, in the
So like in the movies. And was there like a password?
didn't go in any kind of drag, didn't use the word she, that type. But they were gay, 100% gay. And then as you turn into the other room with the jukebox, those were the drag queens around the jukebox. Mary, Queen of the Scotch, Congo Woman.
Queen of the Scotch. That's good.
Miss Twiggy.
What was so good about the Stonewall was that you could dance slow there, because we could feel a sense of love for each other that we couldn't show out in the street, because you couldn't show any affection out in the street.
It was a chance to find love, you know? I had never seen anything like that. I never saw so many gay people dancing in my life. And I said to myself, oh my God, this will not last.
Heterosexuals legally had lots of sexual outlets. They call them hotels, motels, lovers' lanes, drive-in movie theaters, etc. Gay people were told we didn't have any of that, and we had no right to such. Except for the few mob-owned bars that allowed some socializing, it was basically verboten. And so we had to create these spaces, mostly in the trucks.
What?
And these were meat trucks.
Don't you remember from the movie?
Yeah.
Industry for moving dead produce. And they really reeked. But at nighttime, that's where people went to have sex, you know, and there would be
Oh my God.
hundreds of men having sex together in these trucks.
Dude, really? Wow.
I heard about the trucks, which to me was fascinating. You know, I had an imagination thinking it was like Marseille. How could it be only a few blocks away? But we went down to the trucks, and there people would have sex in the trucks or around the trucks. And it just seemed like fantastic, because the background was this industrial, becoming an industrial ruin. It was a masculine setting. It was a whole world.
I'd go in there, and I would look, and I would just cringe, because, you know, people would start touching me. And, hello, what are you doing there if you don't want to be touched?
Oh.
But I was just curious. I didn't want to participate because, number one, it was so packed.
I have a story to tell you later about that.
Oh my God, you totally need to.
It's hysterical.
It was definitely dark, it was definitely smelly and raunchy and dirty, and that's the only places that we had to meet each other, was in the very dirty.
All of the rules that I had grown up with and that I had hated in my guts, other people were fighting against and saying, no, it doesn't have to be this way.
Wow. Oh God.
And deep down, I believe, because I was gay and couldn't speak out for my rights, was probably one of the reasons that I was so active in the civil rights movement. It was a way to vent my anger at being repressed.
What we felt in isolation was a growing sense of outrage and fury, particularly because we looked around and saw so many avenues of rebellion.
We had thought of women's rights. We had thought of black rights. We thought of all kinds of human rights. But we never thought of gay rights. And whenever we got kicked out of a bar before, we never came together.
The election was in November of 1969, and this was the summer of 1969. This was June. Mayor John
This is when it
Lindsay,
all goes down.
like most mayors, wanted to get reelected. And the police escalated their crackdown on bars because of the reelection campaign.
To clean up, yes, of course. Also, now they're bragging about how many of us they arrested.
All of straight America, in terms of the middle class, was recoiling in horror from what
Now, what's interesting is that you have to realize 90%, 99% of it were all white people and mostly white men who were in power. So the race factor is an element of it all.
was just
Wow.
erupting,
Yeah.
as far as they were concerned, like a gigantic boil.
Which is why they often use the argument now, white replacement theory and all this other stuff that they're fighting against in these culture wars nowadays. But it boils down to the fact it's the same sentiment they've had all along. Anything that's not them, white and straight, must be feared.
Yeah. Wow.
There was also vigilantism. People were using walkie-talkies to coordinate attacks on gay men.
Really?
So gay people were being
That is horrible.
shot,
Oh my God. Jesus.
blackmailed, fired from jobs.
God. Oh, no. No.
I had just turned 18 on June 27th, 1969. I was celebrating my birthday at the Stonewall. Beginning of our night out started early. When we got dressed for that night, we had cocktails and we put the makeup on.
Blow up, girl.
I was wearing my mother's black and white cocktail dress that was empire waisted.
Oh.
I didn't think I could have been any prettier than that night.
Oh.
I told the person at the door, I said, I'm 18 tonight. And he said to me, little SOB, he said, you could have got us in a lot of trouble. Could have got us closed up. Well, little did he know that what was going to happen later on, was to make history.
I remember it being a clear evening with a big black sky and the biggest white moon I ever saw.
It was incredibly hot. You throw into that the Stonewall was raided the previous Tuesday night.
Oh.
So it was a perfect storm for the police. They didn't know what they were walking into.
Most raids by the New York City police, because they were paid off by the mob, took place on a weeknight. They took place early in the evening. The place would not be crowded. This was a highly unusual raid. Going in there in the middle of the night with a full crowd, the mafia hasn't been alerted, the 6th precinct hasn't been alerted.
We only had about 6 people altogether from the police department. Knowing that you had a precinct right nearby that would send assistance.
We were at the back of the room, and the lights went on. So everybody saw what they were doing. Because now the police started coming in, raiding the bar. They pushed everybody to the back room and slowly asking for IDs. Meanwhile, there was crowds forming outside the Stonewall, wanting to know what was going on.
We were talking about the revolution happening, and we were walking up 7th Avenue, and we were thinking that it was either Black Panthers or the Young Lords are going to start it. And we turned the corner from 7th Avenue onto Christopher Street, and we saw the paddy wagon pull up there. And some people came out and were being very dramatic, throwing their arms up in a V, as the victory sign.
That night, I'm in my office. I look down the street, and I could see the Stonewall sign, and I started to see some activity in front. So I run down there, and as I'm looking around to see what's going on, police cars, different things happening, it's getting bigger by the minute. And the people coming out weren't going along with it so easily.
I mean, there were only 6 cops.
A rather tough lesbian was busted in the bar. But when she came out of the bar,
it had always gone their way.
Yeah. And it's like that, right? The oppressors get used to their power, And for everyone to always go along?
And I ran into Howard Smith on the street. The Village Voice was right there. And Howard said, boy, there's like a riot gonna happen here. And I said, yeah, and the police were showing up. And so Howard said, we've got police press passes upstairs. You know, Howard's concern was, and my concern was, if all hell broke loose, they'd just start busting heads. At least if you had press, maybe your head wouldn't get busted.
Things started off small, but there was an energy that began to flow through the crowd.
People were screaming, pig, copper. People started throwing pennies.
And then everybody started
Copper pennies.
like, you know, like they were. This is what they were, nothing but copper. You know, coppers. That's what they were worth.
So it was mostly goofing, really, basically goofing on them, getting them in the car, rocking them back and forth, calling them names, telling them how good looking they were, grabbing their butts, doing things like that, you know, just making their lives miserable for once.
At a certain point, it felt pretty dangerous to me. But I noticed that the cop that seemed in charge, he said, you know what? We have to go inside for safety. Your choice. You can come in with us, or you could stay out here with the crowd and report your stuff from out here. I said, I can go in with you? He said, okay, let's go. He pulls all his men inside. It's the first time I'm fully inside the Stonewall.
So then I got pushed back into the Stonewall by these plainclothes cops, and they would not let me out. They didn't let anybody out. They were just holding us almost like in a hostage situation where you don't know what's going to happen next.
But there were little tiny pinholes in the plywood windows. I'll call them the windows, but they were plywood. And we could look out from there. And every time I went over and looked out through one of the pinholes where he did, we were shocked at how big the crowd had become.
Ooh.
They were getting more ferocious. Things were being thrown against the plywood. We piled things up to try to buttress it.
Someone at this point had apparently gone down to the cigar stand on the corner and got lighter fluid.
And then
oh my God.
Started a fire. They started with little lighters and matches.
Incendiary devices were being thrown in. I don't think they were Molotov cocktails, but it was just fire being thrown in when the doors got open.
Well, we did use the small hoses on the fire extinguishers, but we couldn't hold out very long.
I was very anti-police, had many years already of activism against the forces of law and order. This was the first time I could actually sense, not only see them fearful, I could sense them fearful.
There was joy because the cops weren't winning. The cops were barricaded inside. We were winning.
I was with a group that we actually took a parking meter out of the ground. We had 3 or 4 people, and we used it as a battering ram.
Oh, Miss New Orleans, she wouldn't be stopped. And she was quite crazy.
Wow, what?
And when she grabbed that, everybody knew she couldn't do it alone, so all the other queens, Congo women and queens like that started, and they were hitting that door. I mean, they were making some headway.
Bam, bam, you know, and bash, and opening, and go, whoa!
Ooh.
We had maybe 6 people, and by this time there were several thousand outside.
You could hear...
Thousands? Wow, really? That's incredible.
From the protesters. And it was a good sound. It was a real good sound to know that, you know, you had a lot of people out there pulling for you.
I did try to get out of the bar, and I thought that there might be a way out through one of the bathrooms. Somebody grabbed me by the leg and told me I wasn't going anywhere.
The moment you stepped out that door, there would be hundreds facing you. It was terrifying. It was as bad as any situation that I had met in during the Army. Had just as much to worry about.
You know, our goal was to hurt those police. I wanted to kill those cops for the anger I had in me. And the cops got that.
Oh my God.
Lucky that door was closed. They were very lucky, because I was from the streets.
And I keep listening and listening and listening, hoping I'm going to hear sirens any minute.
That's terrifying.
Because if they weren't there fast, I was worried that there was something going on that I didn't know about, and they weren't going to come.
Our radio was cut off every time we got on the police radio. That never happened before.
So at that point, the police are extremely nervous, and a couple of them had pulled out their guns. I actually thought, as all of them did, that we were going to be killed. And if enough people broke through, they would be killed and I would be killed. They'd think I'm a cop. Even though I had a big Jufro haircut and handlebar mustache at the time. But I'm wearing this police thing. I'm thinking, well, if they break through, I better take it off really quickly. But they're going to come this way, and we're going to be backing up. And who knows what'll happen.
We told this to our men. Don't fire.
Sounds really scary.
Don't fire until I fire.
And he went to each man and said it by name, like, Joe, if you fire your gun without me saying your name and the words fire, you will be walking a beat on Staten Island all alone on a lonely beach for the rest of your police career. Do you understand me?
Well, I had to act that I wasn't nervous, that this is normal stuff. But everybody knew it wasn't normal stuff. And everyone was on edge. And that was the worst part of it, because you knew they were on edge. And you knew that the first shot that was fired meant all the shots would be fired.
Yeah. I mean, at least he kept his head about him, you know, because imagine having thousands of people screaming.
Screaming, yelling. The ones that came close, you could see their faces in rage.
So finally, when they started taking me out, arm in arm, up to the paddy wagon, I jumped up and I put 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other, and I sprung back, knocking the 2 arresting officers, knocking to the ground. And a whole bunch of people in the paddy wagon ran out.
All of a sudden, Miss New Orleans and all the people around her started marching step by step, and the police started moving back. That's what gave oxygen to the fire. Because as the police moved back, we were conscious of the area we were controlling, and now we were in control of the area. Because we were surrounded the bar, we were moving in, they were moving back.
And by the time the police would come back towards Stonewall, that crowd had gone all the way around to Washington Place, come all the way back around, and were back pushing in on them from the other direction. And the police would wonder, these are the same people or different people?
With Waverly Street coming in there, West 4th coming in there, 7th Avenue coming in there, Bristol Street coming in there, there was no way to contain us.
And the blocks were small enough that we could run around the block and come in behind them before they got to the next corner. And this went on for hours.
Cool.
We were like...
Oh, that map was really helpful. I was trying to picture how it went.
The next person stood up.
Can you imagine the feeling of power from in the crowd? Like, cops are moving away from us.
Gay people were never supposed to be threats to police officers. They were supposed to be weak men, limp-wristed, not able to
do
anything. And here they were lifting things up and fighting them and attacking them and beating them.
And I remember moving into the open space and grabbing onto two of my friends, and we started singing and doing a kick line. And we were singing, "We are the village girls. We wear our hair in curls. We wear our dungarees above our Nelly knees." This was in front of the police.
I mean, the riot squad was used to riots. They were not used to a bunch of drag queens doing a Rockettes kick and sort of like giving them all the finger in a way.
Kick line. That is so amazing. It's perfect. It's perfect.
The clubs.
And then more police came, and it didn't stop. Windows were starting to break. And all of a sudden, pandemonium broke loose.
What they did in the Stonewall that night, I went in there and they took bats and just busted that place up. The mirrors, all the bottles of liquor, the jukebox, the cigarette machines.
This was all mafia-owned stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Tires were slashed on police cars, and it just went on all night long.
Cops got hurt.
Wow.
It must have been terrifying for them. I hope it was. It gives back a little of the terror they gave in my life.
Those of us that were the street kids, we didn't think much about the past or the future. We were thinking about survival. So anything that would set us off, we would go into action. And it's that hairpin trigger thing that makes the riot happen. The police weren't letting us dance.
That word,
One
survival.
place in the world where you can dance and feel yourself fully as a person, and that's threatened with being taken away. Those words are fighting words.
Never expected it.
And I looked back, and there were about 2,000 people behind us, and that's when I knew it had happened.
Oh.
I cannot tell this without tearing up. And Peter and I walked the rest of the whole thing with tears running down our face. But that's when we knew we were ourselves for the first time.
Wow, that is, because it's the first time a group comes together, you know, and then you see you are not alone.
Yep.
Because we are everywhere. It's just that we've always been
Homosexual
hidden,
monsters, and we were so innocent, and oddly enough, we were so American.
It's very American to say, this is not right. It's very American to say, you promised equality, you promised freedom. And in a sense, the Stonewall riots said, get off our backs, deliver on the promise. So in every gay pride parade, every year, Stonewall lives.
It was another great step forward in the story of human rights. That's what it was. And it was those loudest people, the most vulnerable, the most likely to be arrested, were the ones that were doing the real fighting. They were the stormtroopers.
And they were kids. You knew you could ruin them for life. And you felt bad that you were part of this when you knew they broke the law, but what kind of law was that?
Wow. Wow. That was really powerful. I had no idea about everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing about discovering your own power, you know, after spending maybe all of human history being oppressed and ignored and made to feel like you were a horrible person just for being you, and then fighting back, it's just wonderful.
But it's interesting too, because I even remember when I would go to Pride events in the early 80s, because I had graduated in 82. And I remember even then, even though it had been 12 years since the first ones had happened, you still went and you still did a bit of that.
Oh no.
You know, even because, you know, this is pre-internet, you know, the only way you found your people was to go to places that you heard where they hung out. So here in San Diego, there was a section of Balboa Park, which is like Central Park in New York. It's the big park in San Diego. Balboa Park had this one area where there was a loop that was a one-way car ride, and that became known as the Fruit Loop. And that's where all the queers would hang out. And so we took over during the 80s and into the 90s. That was our segment of the park.
Okay.
And you could go out there during the day. I mean, that's how I met all the friends that I have now. That was my found family. I found them there in the Fruit Loop. And it's interesting because I go there now, and because of the internet, because of everything that we have now, it's no longer needed. And it's kind of bittersweet to be there.
Oh, yeah.
And what's interesting, I know when they hold Pride here in San Diego, they actually go to the Fruit Loop. It's still where the Pride event is held, because it does have a historical significance for the queer community here in San Diego. But it's not the Mecca meeting place that it used to be. I mean, before you would go there and it would be just filled with gays all over, sitting on the lawn. It was kind of a sloping lawn, and it was this huge loop. So it wasn't very small. It was a sizable piece of land, but it was just populated with just queers just getting to know each other, hanging out. And then we talk about what bar we're going to go to later on that night. And, you know, it was just a Mecca way for us to congregate and really lean into that found family kind of thing. And it was just an amazing time, but that was all you had. Is you had to make a connection somehow. And once you made that connection, you use that connection to make further connections, you know, so that became the way that you do it. And I mean, kids nowadays, you know, they think, oh, I've got an app, I can just look up and see, you know, I mean, it seems so easy, but they don't understand all of the heartache and the blood, sweat, and tears that happen to get us to where we are now. You know, and that's in any country, you know, because Stonewall had a rippling effect, and other queer communities around the world, you know, London had theirs shortly thereafter. It started spawning them. And so I think it's interesting because in many respects, those that are in power are the ones who are the most afraid. That's what it boils down to. And in this country here, it was straight white men, you know, and that's still what the problem is here. You know, you've got Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's bringing out the old playbook of gays being groomers, of recruiting children. And that's what all this stuff is. But it's the same playbook from the 60s. We've been through it, which is why I always want to gather the gay children together and say, look, kids, we've been through this before. Here's how you combat that. And the thing is, I think that that's what a lot of queer kids nowadays don't understand, that the value of knowing your queer elders, of being around your queer elders. It lets you shortcut the trauma and tribulations that the community go through, because you've learned from your elders what they did, so you're able to put things in action much quicker and respond much quicker. And I think that that's one of the things as a community we still have to learn. But I think shows like this that show how it began go a long way into getting people to realize that the community doesn't end after you turn 30 and suddenly you're an old gay that, you know, shouldn't be going to clubs anymore because you're not young and pretty anymore, you know. And but you need to understand, which is why, like, I went to a gay bar with a friend of mine. We were the best of gay, we were GBFs, we were gay best friends. And he often liked to go to leather bars. He was into the scene, I wasn't, but we were best of friends, and he just liked going to them. And we were both underage, we were both 18, and we had to get into 21. So he would flirt with the doorman at one of the leather bars, and who took a fancy to him, and that's how we got in. And I spent the whole night, when we got into this one bar, I spent the whole night with these older leather daddies, and we sat and talked, and I learned so much from them about how the community developed. It was the best night of my life. It was the best education I could have ever gotten about the queer community in San Diego. And a lot of them were ex-military, and because San Diego's a Navy town, this is how I knew this is how it worked. Once they got out of the Navy, they just stayed in San Diego and connected with one another, and that's how a good part of the community was born. You know, the funny story I wanted to tell you that I think is hysterical. We were talking about going into, when they showed like the movie theaters and stuff that they used to go to, there was a place here, an adult bookstore called F Street Bookstore here in San Diego. And there was this young Latino queer kid who came from Fresno, California, or no, not Fresno, Barstow, which is a desert town, literally halfway between San Diego and Las Vegas. You pass through it to get there. But he was from this little town. He was a Latino boy who was very, very sheltered, but knew he was gay. He came out to San Diego to go to college. And that's how I met him. I ended up being the first boy he ever kissed, which I didn't know until recently. But anyways, he, you know, he wanted, you know, he didn't know anything about gay life, but he knew he was, you know. So I took him to F Street Bookstore, and he was just eyes this big and jaw on the floor, you know. And then he wanted to go where the video booths were. And I just thought, okay, well, you know, if you want to go see, let's go, you know. So I got some, I exchanged some dollars for quarters. We went in there, into one of the booths. We crammed in there, and the video thing was on. So I put the quarter in, and it turned on, and it was two guys going at it. And he's like, oh, and he started hitting the change the channel button. And I looked at him and I said, what are you looking for? I Love Lucy?
Oh my God! So
he said, "You're not going to find regular TV."
I mean, yeah. What was he expecting? Oh my God.
So anytime they talk about those adult theaters, of that, I always go back to that moment because it was priceless. He was just and he just kept punching the button, and it just kept flipping from one porn to. And I was dying. I thought that was, I mean, I know I must have broke the mood in that place because I was cracking up so hard. It's freaking out. Anyways.
Can you imagine his shock? Just like, oh my God, it's happening. It's
happening. I don't know what he expected. Like, was there going to be some love story before they had the sex? But it was like, no, you're in a porno theater. What the hell do you think is going on? And then I used to go there with my friend Robert, who we would love to go. We were so horrible. This is the same boy who got us into the leather clubs. We used to like to go to the porn shops, and we would pick up the magazines. And our favorite thing to do was to get to a magazine where some guy's looking like really sexy or whatever. And we would open the book up, and we turned it to the other one of us, and we'd say, "Hi, Mom, look at me." You know, we would say things like that. Just, you know, I mean, just to make fun of the pictures. And I know that we were breaking the mood of that place, but it was just some weird twisted thing that we love to do, you know. So, you know, queers do what we do. We subvert the norm, you know.
Yep. I am never going to forget that thing about the kick line in the demonstrations. Like, why, how, and somehow it's perfect, and I'll never forget that. It
or you know, just when they're all locked up in the paddy wagon, they stop at a light. Oh, here, girls, this is my stop. You know, that's what we do. Anyways, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It is very instructional. I'm hoping that the children come watch it because they really should understand where it all started and know that fissures happened before Stonewall in other parts of the planet. So just know that this whole rumble thing that happened in the 60s, it really was a pot about to boil over. I mean, the whole world was kind of on edge, which is why Britain followed very quickly after that. I'm not quite sure how it happened in Mexico, but there are things like that erupted, and once Stonewall exploded, it just had this ripple effect. And the next movie we're going to do is Riot, which is a Australian film about their uprising and how they found it. So again, this is born out of the whole Stonewall thing and how those things happened, so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was so cool. Yeah, I learned a lot, and I think that's the most important takeaway from this.
And it's nice that you got to listen to it from the people who were there.
Yeah.
Not secondhand, not reading from a newspaper article. You had the actual reporters who wrote the articles, so
cool.
Anyways, well, I'm really glad you liked it. Hopefully you guys did too. Make sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends about what we're doing here. The full reactions are going to be on Patreon. The watered down edited versions are going to be here on YouTube. But seek us out. We have merchandise. Here's my Rote t-shirt for the Rote podcast.
So cool.
So we have a store connection on our YouTube channel and also on our website, rotepodcast.com. Definitely check that out. Go to albertnorthlet.com to check out his works and the stuff he's working on. And stay in touch. Watch those movies, make those memories, and we'll catch you next time. Talk to you later. Bye. And we'll cut there. My husband's waving.
Oh, of course.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in Melody, dear.